Picture this. There's a road in Virginia, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through nearly 400 years of American history. It's called the Colonial Parkway, and it was designed to be a dream. It connects Jamestown, where the English first landed, to colonial Williamsburg, where the Revolution was born, and finally to Yorktown, where it all ended. It's 23 miles of rolling hills, dense forests, and scenic overlooks where the James and York rivers sprawl out like sheets of grey glass. By day, it's a living museum, thick with tourist buses and families reading historical markers. But when the sun goes down, especially back in the 1980s, it became something else entirely. The tourist buses vanished, the park rangers clocked out, and the road was plunged into a deep, almost primal darkness. The trees, ancient and heavy, create a canopy that suffocates the moonlight. It's isolated, it's quiet, and it became the perfect place for young lovers to escape, to park their cars and to just be. It was the quintessential lover's lane for the whole region, but that isolation, that suffocating quiet, that sense of being disconnected from the world, also made it the perfect hunting ground. Between 1986 and 1989, that scenic parkway, that artery of American history, became a 23-mile stretch of terror. It became the territory of a ghost, a phantom who stalked these overlooks, targeting couples, and executing them with a chilling and baffling inconsistency. The papers called him the Colonial Parkway Phantom, and for almost 40 years he has remained just that, a ghost, leaving behind 8 victims, 4 shattered vehicles, and a community haunted by a question that eats away at its very soul. How do 8 people die on a federally protected, high-profile historical parkway, and the killer just walks away? The fear was palpable. You have to understand what the 1980s were like. This was the dawn of the 24-hour news cycle, the era where the serial killer stopped being a pulp novel fantasy and became the man next door, thanks to guys like Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy. But this felt different. This wasn't happening in the sprawling suburbs of California or the concrete jungle of New York. This was sleepy, historic, conservative Virginia, a place built on tradition and the comfort of knowing your neighbors. The parkway was supposed to be safe. It was federal land. And then, in October 1986, that illusion was shattered. The first bodies were found, and the story that unfolded was one of such brutal, confusing violence that it sent a shockwave through the community. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was something cold, something methodical, and it was just the beginning. Over the next 3 years, 3 more couples would be targeted. Each case was just different enough from the last to be confusing, but just similar enough to be terrifying. The killer, or killers, was using the parkway as his personal stage, and the police, from the local cops to the Virginia State Police to even the FBI, were utterly, tragically, and perhaps even deliberately lost. This isn't just a story about a cold case. This is a story about a deep, dark failure at every level of law enforcement. It's a story about missing evidence, bizarre theories, jurisdictional infighting, and a stench of cover-up so strong it chokes you. It's a story about families who have been forced to become detectives, fighting the very agencies that were supposed to give them answers, and a story about a truth that might be so dark, so twisted, that the powers that be would rather it stay buried forever, somewhere in the cold, damp earth along the Colonial Parkway. It all began on October 12, 1986. The victims were Cathleen Thomas, who was 27, and Rebecca Ann Dowski, who was 21. These were not reckless teenagers. These were smart, ambitious women. Kathy was a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, a stockbroker. Becky was a finance student at the College of William and Mary. They were in a relationship, a private one, which in the conservative South of 1986 was a brave and complicated thing to be. They were last seen at the college, and when they didn't return, they were reported missing. A few days later, a park ranger, just doing his rounds, spots something. Down a steep, wooded embankment just off a secluded overlook on the parkway, half hidden by the brush, is Kathy's white Honda Civic. The scene is wrong. The car's driver's side door is open, the wipers are on, the radio is playing, and there's less than a gallon of gas in the tank. Inside, the investigators found a nightmare. Both women were in the hatchback, but they hadn't been shot, they hadn't been bludgeoned. Their throats had been slit, cut so deeply, so viciously, that one of them was nearly decapitated. There was a strong smell of diesel fuel in the car, and investigators found a box of matches. The killer, it seemed, had tried to set the car on fire to incinerate the evidence, but for some reason, maybe he was spooked, maybe the fuel just didn't catch, he failed. The scene was horrifically violent, but also meticulous. The car, despite the blood, seemed to be wiped clean of fingerprints. And then the investigation began, and right out of the gate it went sideways. The FBI, seeing two women in a known gay-friendly area of the Parkway, immediately latched onto a theory. This was a lesbian lovers' quarrel that turned violent, or a targeted anti-gay hate crime. They focused on the local gay community, pulling people in, wasting precious time on a theory that felt, to the families, completely wrong. Kathy's brother, Bill Thomas, would later say he felt the FBI was more interested in investigating his sister's lifestyle than in finding her killer. They were looking at the victims, not the evidence, and in doing so, they missed the first whispers of the phantom who was just getting started. David's black Ford Ranger pickup truck is found at the refuge's entrance, and again, the scene is just off. The keys are in the ignition, the radio is on, the wipers are swishing back and forth. On the dashboard, in plain sight, is David's wallet. This is not a robbery. This is something else. The police search, but they find nothing. It's not until 3 days later that a jogger, David's own father who was frantically searching for his son, finds them. The tide had brought them in. Both David and Robin had been shot. Not a struggle, not a frenzied attack like the one in Kathy's Honda. This was cold, calculated, execution style. One shot to the back of the head for each. The lovers' quarrel theory is instantly dead. The hate crime theory is dead. Now, the police and the media have a new, terrifying narrative. There is a Lover's Lane killer stalking the Tidewater region. The MO is completely different, slashing versus shooting, but the setup is identical. A couple, parked in a secluded spot, their vehicle left behind as a silent, eerie beacon. The panic is real now. Parents are telling their kids, "You do not go to the Parkway. You do not go to Ragged Island. You come straight home." The police are scrambling, trying to connect two cases that seem, on the surface, to be polar opposites in their violence. Is it one killer who is evolving, changing his methods? Or is it something even more terrifying? Two different killers, operating in the same area, using the same couple victimology. The questions are piling up, and the answers are nowhere to be found. The spring of 1988 arrives, and with it, the most baffling and heartbreaking chapter of this whole saga. This time, it's back to the Colonial Parkway. The victims, or perhaps the missing, are Cassandra Hailey, 18, and Richard Keith Call, 20. They were both students at Christopher Newport College. It was their first date. A detail so innocent, so pure, that it makes what happened next feel even more profane. They were last seen at a party, and Keith was driving his father's brand-new, bright red 1982 Toyota Celica. He was supposed to have Cassandra home by midnight. They never made it. The next morning, his car is found, abandoned at the Cheatham Annex overlook on the Colonial Parkway. And this is where your blood runs cold. It's the exact same signature. The car door is open, the keys are in the ignition, but this time, on the floorboard and draped over the seats, are the clothes of the victims. Keith's pants, his socks, his shoes. Cassandra's pants, her shoes. Their wallets, their purses, everything of value is left right there in the car. It's a scene of almost impossible mystery. It's as if they were forced to undress and then just walked away, overtaken. A massive search is launched. The woods are combed. The rivers are dragged by sonar teams. The FBI, state police, everybody is on this. And they find nothing. Not a shred of clothing in the woods, not a footprint, not a body. They are just gone, vanished, as if they were abducted by aliens. This is the case that breaks the mold. This isn't a murder scene, it's a disappearance. The killer didn't just dump the bodies, he took them. And in doing so, he inflicted a special kind of torture on the Hailey and Call families, a permanent, agonizing limbo. For decades, they have existed in this hellish gray space, not knowing if their children are dead, or if they were trafficked, or if they're buried in some shallow grave that the searchers missed by an inch. This is the case that, for me, tips the scales from a serial killer to something far, far stranger. The final act, the one that cemented the Colonial Parkway Murders as a full-blown series, came in October 1989. This one, again, breaks the pattern. The victims are Daniel Lauer, 21, and Annamaria Phelps, 18. Annamaria was dating Daniel's sister, but was out with Daniel that night. Their car, a gold 1980 Chevrolet Nova, wasn't found on the parkway. It was found at a rest stop on Interstate 64, miles away, but on a route leading to the parkway. The car was abandoned, but this time it was locked. Annamaria's purse was inside, but her wallet, with $300, was gone. Was this, finally, a robbery? The police were confused. But then, almost 2 months later, a pair of hunters, deep in the woods miles away from the rest stop, stumbled onto a scene of absolute horror. It was the bodies of Daniel and Annamaria. They were badly decomposed, ravaged by animals. The cause of death was ambiguous. The medical examiner couldn't be certain. The official report would later suggest they were stabbed, or perhaps cut, but the state of the bodies made it impossible to know for sure. It felt, in some ways, like a horrifying echo of the first murders, the blade. But the location, the robbery element, it was all wrong. And yet, the connection was undeniable. It was another couple, disappearing from their car, found murdered. The FBI task force, codenamed PATCOM, an acronym for Parkway Area Thomas Commonwealth, was now officially investigating 4 double homicides, 8 victims, 4 different crime scenes, and critically, at least 3, maybe 4, different methods of operation. A brutal slashing, a cold-blooded shooting, a clean, professional abduction, and a messy, ambiguous woodland murder. The public was terrified. The media was in a frenzy, and the investigation, already a mess, was about to collapse under the weight of its own incompetence. So let's talk about the investigation itself, because this is where the story shifts from a tragedy to an absolute farce. This is the part that keeps the families, especially Bill Thomas, Kathy's brother, awake at night. The core problem from day one was jurisdiction. It was a complete and total clown show. You had the FBI, who claimed primary jurisdiction because the parkway is federal land. But you also had the Virginia State Police, who are the top dogs in the state. And you had the local city police from Newport News and Hampton, and the York County Sheriff's Office, and the park rangers, who were essentially park police. You had 5 different agencies, 5 different sets of egos, 5 different ways of processing evidence, and none of them wanted to share their toys. Evidence was collected by one agency, sent to a different agency's lab, and the reports were filed with a third agency. Leads that came into a local tip line were never passed up to the FBI. The FBI, in turn, treated the local cops like amateurs, dismissing their insights. It was a bureaucratic turf war, and while these guys were busy puffing out their chests, a killer was literally getting away with murder. The task force, PATCOM, was supposed to fix this, to centralize the information, but it was, by all accounts, a disaster. They were secretive. They refused to share information with each other, let alone with the families. They were, in the words of one family member, arrogant and incompetent. They were so focused on their own pet theories that they ignored the most obvious, terrifying, and plausible theory of all. This is the theory that chills me to the bone, the one that makes the most sense, and the one the FBI seemed hell-bent on ignoring. The cop killer theory. Think about it. Go back to every single one of these scenes. A couple is parked in a secluded lover's lane. They're young. Maybe they're drinking a beer. Maybe they're just making out. They are, by definition, somewhere they shouldn't be. The only person on this planet who they would willingly roll down their window for, who they would obey without question, is a police officer. Picture the scene. A sharp rap on the glass. A flashlight beam cuts through the darkness, blinding them. A voice of authority. "Park police. License and registration, please." The window comes down. "Step out of the vehicle." They would do it. You would do it. I would do it. It's the perfect ruse. It gives the killer total control from the first second. It explains the lack of a struggle at the cars. It explains how he could subdue two people at once. It explains how he could get one of them, maybe the man, into his own car, to run his license, while he deals with the woman. It explains everything. And this wasn't just a wild fantasy. Bill Thomas, Kathy's brother, has been screaming this from the rooftops for decades. There were credible reports of a man impersonating a park ranger in the area around that time. There were even rumors of a specific rogue local cop who was a known problem. But the FBI and the VSP, they hated this theory. They shut it down hard. Why? Well, think about it. The cop killer theory is the single worst-case scenario for law enforcement. It's not just an investigation, it's an internal affairs nightmare. It means the monster they're hunting is one of their own. It's the ultimate betrayal. And it's much, much easier to hunt for a faceless phantom, a mythical serial killer, than it is to turn the flashlight on your own ranks and face the monster wearing your uniform. And then we get to the really, really weird stuff. The stuff that sounds like it's straight out of a political thriller, but it's all true. The Colonial Parkway, this quiet, scenic road, runs directly adjacent to one of the most secretive and secure places in the entire United States, Camp Peary. If you don't know the name, you know its nickname, the Farm. Camp Peary is the CIA's primary training facility. It's where they train their clandestine service officers, spies, operatives, people who are taught how to kill, how to abduct, how to make people disappear. The overlook where Keith Call and Cassandra Hailey's car was found, the couple who vanished into thin air, is literally right next to Camp Peary. We're talking walking distance. The parkway is also a stone's throw from the Yorktown Naval Weapons Station, a massive military base. This entire area, this historic triangle, is also a military and intelligence triangle. Now, I'm not saying a CIA assassin went rogue and started killing couples, but the coincidence is deafening. What if one of those couples, particularly Call and Hailey, saw something they shouldn't have? A clandestine training exercise, a weapons transfer, a dead drop. What if their abduction wasn't the act of a random serial killer, but a professional cleanup operation? It sounds paranoid until you hear how the FBI reacted. The families, especially the Call family, begged the FBI to look into this. Just check the logs at Camp Peary. Check the security gates. See who signed in and out that night. It's a simple, logical investigative step. The FBI refused, flat out. They would not, and have not, ever touched that lead. They just pretend it doesn't exist. That kind of brick wall, that total refusal to even look, is what turns suspicion into conspiracy. Let's talk about the evidence, because that's the other part of this nightmare. For decades, the families were told the same thing. It's an active investigation. We can't comment, but we're working on it. Years turned into decades. The 80s became the 90s. The 90s became the 2000s. The original detectives retired or died. The files, spread across 5 different agencies, gathered dust. But the families, led by Bill Thomas, never ever gave up. They became a team, the Colonial Parkway Murders families, and they started pushing. They pushed for DNA testing, and in 2009, the FBI held a big, splashy press conference. A major breakthrough. We have DNA. They had apparently found hairs and other biological material during the original Thomas Dowski autopsy, stuff that had been tucked away in an evidence file. They tested it. And nothing. No match in CODIS, the National DNA Database. It was a crushing disappointment, but the families kept pushing. They started asking what was tested, how it was tested, and they uncovered a second tragedy. The original forensic work was a joke. Evidence was mishandled, cross-contaminated, or lost. The FBI, in its 2009 testing, had consumed, meaning destroyed, almost all of the original samples. The families were livid. They had to fight, tooth and nail, to get the remaining scraps of evidence transferred to a modern, private lab. They had to raise their own money to pay for new, cutting-edge MVAC testing, a system that can suck DNA from fabrics and surfaces like a high-tech vacuum. They were literally doing the FBI's job for them. And this is where the story gets really dark. Bill Thomas, in his quest, requested the case files for his sister. He discovered that the FBI possessed a series of extremely graphic, disturbing photographs of Kathy and Becky's bodies. These weren't standard crime scene photos. They were described as almost posed, focusing on the horrific nature of the throat wounds, taken in a morgue setting. Why? For what purpose? Bill asked to see them, thinking they might hold a clue his untrained eye could catch, or just out of a need to know. The FBI refused. Refuses. To this day, they will not let him, the victim's brother, see those photographs. What is in those pictures that they are so desperate to hide? This is where I have to step in with my own analysis, my own controversial take. Because when you look at this whole picture, the official story just doesn't hold water. And my first and most significant opinion is this. We are not looking for one serial killer. The Colonial Parkway Phantom is a myth. He's a boogeyman, created by media hysteria and solidified by lazy, incompetent police work. The MOs are just too wildly, fundamentally different. Let's be logical. A killer who uses a blade, a knife, to slit a throat, that is a personal, high-risk, messy, emotional, frenzied act. It requires overpowering two people up close. The killer of Thomas and Dowski was enraged. He was driven by something personal. It screams hate crime. Then, a year later, we have a killer who uses a gun. A shooting is the opposite of a slashing. It is distant. It is cold. It is impersonal. It is about control and efficiency. It's an execution. This killer, the one who murdered Knobling and Edwards, was a different animal entirely. He was organized. He was detached. Then we have the Hailey case, a clean, professional-level abduction where two human beings are spirited away, never to be seen again, leaving their clothes behind in a bizarre ritualistic pile. This is not a frenzied slasher. This is not a cold-blooded shooter. This is a ghost. This is someone with a plan, a vehicle, and a place to put two bodies where they will never be found. That takes a level of sophistication that is frankly terrifying. And finally, the Lauer Phelps case. A possible robbery, a car dumped at a rest stop, bodies found months later, with an ambiguous cause of death. It's a complete mess. The only thing these four crimes have in common is that the victims were couples and they were in the same general area. It is, in my opinion, infinitely more likely that we are looking at 3, possibly 4 different predators who were all operating in the same time frame, and the police, through sheer incompetence, just bundled them all together under one convenient, headline-grabbing name. They know they contaminated the crime scenes. They know they let the real killer walk because they were too busy chasing their tails in a jurisdictional pissing match. And if that truth comes out, it means massive, multi-million-dollar lawsuits from the families. It means ruined careers, destroyed pensions, and a public humiliation for the Bureau that would make headlines for a decade. It's a cover-up of a screw-up. But there's a second, darker possibility. They're not covering up their incompetence. They're covering up the killer. They're protecting him, because he was, or is, one of them. A cop, a state trooper, a federal agent, or in the most paranoid scenario, a CIA asset from Camp Peary. If the killer was one of their own, the cop killer theory was true, it would be an existential crisis for law enforcement. They would never let that come out. They would bury the case, the evidence, and anyone who asks too many questions. And when you look at their actions for the past 35 years, the refusal to look at the cop angle, the refusal to look at Camp Peary, the refusal to show the families the evidence, it starts to look a lot less like incompetence and a lot more like a deliberate, coordinated, 4-decade-long obstruction of justice. And this brings me to the families. Because while the killers and the cops are the characters in this mystery, the families are the conscience. They are the heart of this story. And no one embodies this more than Bill Thomas, Kathy's brother. This man has lived this case for more than half his life. He has had to transform himself. He wasn't a detective. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a forensic scientist. He's had to become all of those things. He runs the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page and website, which has become the central, definitive source for information on the case. He's the one who fields calls from other victims' families. He's the one who has to get on the phone and argue with FBI agents who are half his age and know nothing about the case. He's the one who has to coordinate with the other families, all of them bound together by this shared, unending trauma. This is the hidden, grinding tragedy of the unsolved. It's not just the murder itself. It's the life sentence it imposes on the survivors. It's a life of what-ifs and whys. It's a life of fighting, of begging for scraps of information from agencies that treat you like a nuisance. The FBI and VSP have, at various points, treated these families as meddlers. They've called them emotional. They've told them to let us do our jobs. But the families are the only reason this job is still being done at all. They are the only reason new DNA testing is happening. They are the only reason we are talking about this today. What does justice even look like after 40 years? The killer, or killers, if they're even still alive, are old men. They're probably grandfathers. They've lived their entire lives. An arrest at this point feels almost hollow. What would it change? It won't bring those 8 young people back. It won't erase the 35 years of torment the families have endured. For the Haileys and the Coles, it probably won't even bring them bodies. They will likely never know what happened to Keith and Cassandra. So, justice, in this case, has to be something more than just a pair of handcuffs. Justice, at this point, is truth. Justice is the FBI and the Virginia State Police opening their books, unsealing the files, and telling the families everything. Justice is them standing up and saying, "We failed you. We lost the evidence. We ignored the cop killer theory. We ignored the Camp Peary lead. And this is why." Justice is giving Bill Thomas those goddamn photographs. The killer, whoever he was, took 8 lives in a few moments of brutal violence. But the system, the agencies that were supposed to provide answers, committed a second, ongoing crime. They stole the truth. They stole the family's right to know. And they've been stealing it, every day, for almost 4 decades. It reflects all of our deepest fears. The fear of the dark, the fear of the stranger in the isolated spot. But it also reflects a deeper, more modern, and more corrosive fear. The fear of the system. The fear that the person with the badge and the flashlight, the person you are trained to trust, isn't there to help you, but to harm you. And the even worse fear that the institutions we build, the agencies we fund to find the monsters, are instead the very ones protecting them. This case isn't just unsolved. It feels unsolvable, not because of a brilliant killer, but because of a broken and perhaps malevolent system. It's a story with no ending, a wound that won't close, A set of questions that only gets darker and more twisted with every year that passes. And all the while, that 23-mile road just waits. It cuts through the forest, under the moonlight, holding its secrets tight, whispering them only to the cold, dark waters of the river. And now we are at the end of this video. But before ending this video, I just want to tell you guys a simple thing. I am on this channel since last year, and the quality content I am providing, I don't think you guys are doing justice with me to not like and subscribe. Like in my last video, I got only 6 views. I mean, I invested 3 hours of work to make that video possible, just to get 6 views. Guys, I genuinely want all of you to show some support, and please describe what type of videos you like the most out of my channel. Then I will continue making those videos. I hope you understand what I am trying to. Well, I hope you liked today's video. I will see you in the next video. Take care and goodbye.